Hi again. This is the first time I've done a supplementary class to any of these studies of Daniel. But on Daniel chapter 8, I found so much interesting material that's perhaps a little advanced and is not really essential for those studying the chapter for the first time. I hope to make 3 short videos in which I'll share some amazing historical background, some famous failures of prophetic interpretation, and an experience I had where the truths in Daniel chapter 8 helped to get me through a difficult personal dilemma. Here's a little history to highlight the power of prophecy. In Daniel 8 from 553 BC, we saw that Daniel was shown a vision of a goat with one horn. This goat was identified by the angel Gabriel as being prophetic of the empire of the Greeks that was to come. Alexander the Great and his empire were the fulfillment of this over 200 years later. In Daniel 8:21, the angel Gabriel tells Daniel, "And the rough goat is the kingdom of Greece, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king." The vision not only predicts the coming of the empire of the Greeks, but it also mentions the great horn as signifying its first king. I'm going to be quoting from an ancient Jewish historian, Flavius Josephus. He was sometimes an associate and a negotiator for the Roman government in the 1st century AD. But he was also a loyal Jewish citizen of Israel who wrote perhaps the most famous secular history of Israel, the Antiquities of the Jews. I'll be quoting from Book 11, Chapter 8, paragraphs 4 and 5. Josephus tells of when Alexander the Great came to Jerusalem during his conquest of the Middle East around 332 BC. The high priest in Jerusalem, knowing that Alexander had recently destroyed Tyre and Gaza, poured out his heart to God for divine protection. After that, God spoke to the high priest in a dream that he should take courage and adorn Jerusalem and open the gates. The rest of the people should appear in white garments, but the priests should meet Alexander in the robes of their priesthood without fear, because God would protect them. When Alexander and his troops were not far from Jerusalem, the high priest went outside the walls of the city in a procession with the other priests and multitudes of citizens. Alexander's army was expecting him to plunder the city, but when he saw the multitude at a distance in white garments, and the priests in fine linen, the high priest in purple and scarlet clothing, Alexander approached by himself, showing respect to their God, and saluted the high priest. Those who'd come with Alexander thought he'd lost his senses. Finally, one asked him how, when all others adored him, he should adore the high priest of the Jews. Alexander replied, "I did not adore him, but that God who's honored him with his high priesthood. I saw this very person in a dream in these very clothes when I was in Macedonia." Alexander and his primary forces were from Macedonia originally. In fighting the Persians, Alexander had 3 main battles, first at the Granicus River, then the Battle of Issus, and the ultimate one at Gaugamela. But Alexander is saying here that before he ever started his drive east to defeat the Persians, he'd had this dream in Macedonia that he's now describing to his followers here outside the walls of Jerusalem. The dialogue from the Antiquities of the Jews continues. "I was considering with myself how I might obtain the dominion of Asia. And I saw this man who exhorted me to make no delay, but boldly to pass over the sea. He would conduct my army and would give me the dominion over the Persians. I've not seen any other so clothed that way since then. And now, seeing this person and remembering that vision in my dream, I believe I bring this army under the divine conduct, and shall conquer Darius, destroy the power of the Persians, and all things will succeed according to what is in my own mind." Then he gave the high priest his right hand and came into Jerusalem. And when the book of Daniel was showed him, where Daniel declared that one of the Greeks should destroy the empire of the Persians, Alexander supposed that himself was the person intended. The next day, Alexander asked them what they would want of him. The high priest asked that they might enjoy the laws of their forefathers and might pay no taxes on the 7th year. Alexander granted all they desired. When Alexander the Great was shown Daniel's prophecy by the priests in Jerusalem, he acknowledged that it was a prophecy about himself. Furthermore, years before this, Alexander had seen in a dream these ones in Jerusalem dressed in priestly robes coming to meet him. And this information is taken from a famous secular history book from the 1st century AD. Why should this matter to us over 2,000 years later? To me, it's another example of the veracity and certainty of Bible prophecy. Here, one of the most famous conquerors of all time is shown the prophecy about himself which had been given to Daniel over 200 years before. Alexander acknowledged that it was about him, and then he asked the high priest what he could do for them. And Alexander went on to be a benefactor of the Jewish people in his lifetime. So those who dismiss Bible prophecy and feel it's not relevant to our times are doing so at their own peril. On the other hand, there are those who look for God to yet fulfill his word, for the events of the end time to come and the millennial kingdom of Jesus to be established. Bible prophecy was fulfilled so dramatically and tangibly in the secular world with Alexander the Great in Jerusalem reading about himself in Daniel chapter 8. This should encourage us believers that it will yet be so in our times or times soon to come.